Hello, everyone. This is Castillo again, and this is the second short video that I'm making before the quarter for you to better prepare for the first few lectures. And in this short video, I'm going to talk about how to identify the bottleneck. And I'm going to try to avoid introducing a lot of new terminologies or definitions. I will try to use the most intuitive way to find the bottleneck under two situations. The first situation is when we only have one type of flow unit, and the second situation is when we have multiple types of flow units. So let's take a look at figure 3.8 first. This is the figure from the textbook, and I'm using this figure because I find it very useful for us to understand what a bottleneck is. So for a single flow unit type, the bottleneck is defined by the resource that has the lowest capacity. So recall that in the process, we have multiple stages, or we should say we have multiple resources or activities. And from this graph, we can see that some resources have higher capacity while some resources have lower capacity. And clearly, the process capacity is determined by the resource that has the lowest capacity, which is the bottleneck. Okay, so the capacity of the bottleneck is the process capacity. And in this figure, you can also see some new terminologies such as flow rate. And this flow rate is actually determined by three things: input, process capacity, and demand. It's the minimum of the three. So here on the right panel, you can see that when demand is lower than the process capacity and input, flow rate is equal to the demand. So why do we care about bottleneck? Because bottleneck will cause delays and higher production costs. So we want to avoid delays or higher production costs and have more efficient production and lower production costs and then higher profits. We will need to take care of the bottleneck. And the first thing to do is to identify the bottleneck. We are going to use the textbook examples again. Okay, so recall the circular process example from textbook. And let's assume that we are given the information of the capacity of each resource. For example, for preheater, it can handle 120 tons of ore per hour. And then for log hopper, it's 110 tons per hour. And for the first reactor is 28 tons per 15 minutes. For the second reactor is 400 tons per 4 hours. So the unit is not consistent, right? So the first thing that we want to do is to make the unit consistent. So we're going to use tons per hour for all the resources. And after unifying the units, we can see that the second reactor actually has the lowest capacity, which is 100 tons of ore per hour. So we will say this is the bottleneck. Okay, the second reactor is the bottleneck. And then the process capacity is 100 tons per hour. Okay, we are not going to consider the inputs or the demand. So for this single flow unit type, we're only gonna consider the capacity. And things become more complicated when there are multiple flow unit types. So in this example, which is the Employment Verification Agency's process, let's assume that we are given the information about the number of workers in each step or each resource, and then the number of minutes that each worker needs to complete one application. Okay, and let's assume that the flow unit is the number of application. Okay, different types of applications. We have consulting, we have staff, and we have internship. Okay, Again, the unit is not quite consistent and we are not seeing the capacity. So we're going to do some calculation and then we will get the capacity, okay? So for the file, it's 20 applications per hour. And for the contact faculty or other persons, it's 6 applications per hour, okay? Because there are 2 workers and then it's 20 minutes per application. So three applications per hour per worker and then 2 workers. So we have 6 units per hour. And you can definitely do the calculation yourself and it's not so hard. So by looking at this graph, you'll see that the smallest number is actually 6, okay? Is this the bottleneck? Actually, now we need to consider the demand or inputs, actually, in this case. So let's assume that, okay, we have 3 applications per hour for consulting and 11 applications per hour for staff, and then 4 applications per hour for internship. Okay, let's assume that this is our demand or inputs. Okay, so for this example, okay, for the multiple types, we need to compare each activity's capacity with its demand. And since the consulting is 3 applications per hour, while this resource or this activity, contact faculty or other persons, can handle 6 units per hour. So this doesn't seem to be the bottleneck, right? And we can continue to see, okay, so now 3 goes through this step, and so 3 will go to the next step. And here we have 12 units per hour. However, here we also have 11 applications for staff per hour, and we need to add 11 here. So 11 plus 3 will be 14. But these contact prior employers can only handle 12 units per hour or 12 applications per hour, while actually if they push all the applications to this step, clearly this resource cannot handle all of them. So this is where the congestion happens, and so this becomes the bottleneck. And what if we change assumptions? Let's say now we have 7 applications for consulting per hour and then 5 applications per hour for staff. And we have the same number of applications for internship, which is still 4 per hour. Then what's the bottleneck? So clearly here, this contact faculty or other persons resource cannot handle 7 per hour. It can only handle 6 per hour. So obviously this becomes a bottleneck. But what about contact prior employers? Is this still the bottleneck? So since only 6 can go through per hour, so we add 6 here, and then we have 5 from these pile applications for staff through this step, and so 5 plus 6 is 11, which is smaller than 12. So this resource can totally handle 11 applications. So this is not the bottleneck, and this is. So clearly you see that with multiple flow unit types, the analysis becomes slightly more complicated. And in the textbook, they are using the implied utilization to do the analysis. And the bottleneck is defined by the resource that has the highest implied utilization. And also there's another way to define the flow unit. So here I'm using one application as 1 unit, okay, as 1 flow unit. However, you can also define 1 flow unit as the 1 minute of work, and that might be a more consistent way of defining the flow unit. And the textbook does recommend this other way of defining the flow units. But both units in this particular example, actually the the previous example, okay, the previous set of assumptions, it works. It gives the same conclusion, but in some other assumptions, you may not be able to use this way of defining the flow units. Okay, so I hope that this short video deepens your understanding of how to find the bottleneck. And we will talk about more examples in the help session. And in the next short video, I'm going to briefly mention how to draw a flow diagram and then how to find a bottleneck for the National Cranberry Cooperative 1996. Mistake again, 1996 case. And then hopefully that can help you better understand that case and help you better do the case analysis. All right. So this is the end of this short video, and thank you for watching.